Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So I wanted to cover this story. When I saw the headline, I thought it was absolutely hilarious. And I was wondering when they were going to speak out and say exactly what happened with the whole Archetypes podcast. Now we know that Meghan and Harry signed their deal in 2020, reportedly for $20 million. That was what they were expected to receive. So they had Spotify and they had Netflix, and there were like big numbers being thrown around, 100 million here, 20 million there. You know, they seem to be doing pretty well after leaving the royal family, financially anyway. That's what it looked like on paper. But then, you know, some time went by. They released their New Year's episode, I believe it was, the episode where there were a bunch of celebrities like Elton John talking about how hard the pandemic was for them. And, and then nothing. Complete silence for, 2 years? And I'm thinking there's no way they are going to receive 20 million for doing nothing. But apparently, that's what they expected to happen. That's exactly what they expected to happen. I guess they thought having royal titles meant that they didn't have to do any work. The royal titles alone created the podcast. The royal titles alone earned that money. So they didn't have to do anything. And that's what I suspected this whole time. And I'm glad it's finally been confirmed by an executive at Spotify, allegedly, who said that Meghan Markle and Prince Harry are lazy effing grifters. Those are strong words, and I'm inclined to believe the evidence speaks for itself. 2 years, one podcast episode. That wasn't even much work for you because it involved a bunch of celebrities. And, you know, we had Archie speaking at the end saying Happy New Year. That was it. So Archetypes was released last year, and it did win a couple of awards, People's Choice Awards. And at one point they claimed that it was up there with Joe Rogan's podcast, looking at the numbers. But again, I think that was based on the first week. They had Mariah Carey, they had Serena Williams. I mean, you know, they did have a good lineup. Well, maybe just for literally the first 2 weeks. And after that, I stopped paying attention. You had A-listers on that podcast, such as Mariah Carey, so you would expect it to have done well. But my thing is, why did it take so long to be consistent in releasing content? Apparently they're calling themselves content creators now, but their track record of creating content is not good. Even Netflix took quite a while for them to actually do anything as well. They signed a deal in 2020, and 2020 was like the best year for YouTubers, podcasters, any online content creators. It was literally the best year because people were at home and people started listening to podcasts more than ever. They didn't capitalize off of the publicity they got from the whole Megxit situation, from leaving the royal family in the first place. You know, the whole time the Queen was saying recollections may vary, that whole saga. They never capitalized off of it and they went quiet. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe they're really working, you know, on the podcast behind the scenes, when really, you know, anybody with a phone can make a podcast. And they had access to all these celebrities that they could have had, all these guests. I actually expected them to showcase regular people and, you know, have people from the charities that they highlighted. You know, when they were doing their fake royal duties, their photo shoots at, you know, giving out food, soup kitchens, and they had that Homeboy Industries, I think it was, that charity for ex-gang members. I actually thought that was pretty good charity for them to highlight. I was pleasantly surprised about that. I mean, they could have had the founder of that charity on the podcast, for example. They could have had a lot of people, regular people on the podcast, if they really cared about highlighting certain charities. You know, that would have been a good move. But instead, they went down the celebrity route, of course. And, you know, Meghan didn't want to be upstaged by certain celebrities. She got offended at Mariah Carey calling her a diva, which I would have considered a compliment. If the diva herself called me a diva, I would have considered that a compliment. And she meant it as a compliment. Anybody who knows, I don't know Mariah personally, I like to think I do. But anybody who's a fan of Mariah knows that she would have meant that as a compliment, because she doesn't consider the term diva to be a bad thing. She embraces that term. So she meant it as a compliment. And Meghan, with her petty self, couldn't handle a tiny little bit of perceived criticism. And then went on some tirade. Oh, it was horrible. I couldn't believe she treated Mariah like that. I was very, very offended on Mariah's behalf. And then Serena Williams is on there. She's trying to upstage her. You know, who has gone through the most as a mother? Serena Williams talking about her daughter breaking her arm. Absolutely horrific. And Meghan had to upstage her and make up some fire story that people in South Africa have disputed. So when Archetypes finally came out, a lot of people noticed that there was a huge team behind the whole production. Again, podcast is pretty straightforward. You just get on there and start talking, especially if you have someone on the show with you. You're just having a conversation. It doesn't have to be some big production. Joe Rogan, you know, I'm sure he has a huge team behind him to a degree, but ultimately you get the vibe that he just invites people on the show and, you know, they have a conversation. It's very organic, comes across very genuine. But apparently for Meghan to actually produce anything, and that was another thing, for some reason she split with Harry. It was supposed to be hers and Harry's podcast, but then it just became Meghan's, but okay. She needed a huge team behind her before she could even do anything. One of the main producers behind the podcast, Rebecca Sananes, she spoke out and was highlighting all the people who put in the work when it comes to these podcasts. And then, you know, the celebrity comes along and gets all the glory. And clearly that's what happened in Meghan's case.
I want to talk about this Hollywood Reporter article really quick because it made me big mad. I'm a podcast producer. If you don't know me, my name is Rebecca Sananes. I am the executive producer and creator of Archetypes, hosted by Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. I produced Pivot with Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway. Kara Swisher is one of the people on this list. I want to talk about this list because the 40 most powerful people in podcasting are not executives, they're not celebrity hosts, and they're not talent agents. They are the producers. Producers edit, research, write, make scripts, make the sound good, score. Everything you love about your favorite podcast is because a producer made it. And producers are being undervalued, undercredited, and underpaid. And it's making the industry boring and slow. Let's do better.
And people took it as her throwing shade at Meghan. And on Instagram, she said, "The podcast industry is severely undervaluing and undercrediting the incredibly talented and hardworking producers and sound engineers behind your favourite shows. There are fewer and fewer opportunities for creators, and it's stifling the industry creatively and financially." She then edited the post to add, "To be clear, this isn't about me or my current position. It's an observation of the state of podcasting as a whole." So I understand why he was calling them lazy, because they didn't do anything for a couple of years. And when they finally did do something, when Meghan did something, she had a huge team behind her who practically did everything for her. She just had to turn up and probably read from a script. So let's take a look at the article from page 6. Talking about, you know, an executive. We know they've had some issues at Spotify now. They've had to let go of a lot of people. And many believe it's because they overspent. In particular, the deal with Meghan and Harry, 20 million. Now, again, this executive is saying that they did not receive 20 million for doing nothing. Spotify are not mugs. So they didn't give them 20 million for doing nothing. The chances are they got a lot less than was reported. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry were branded lazy and effing grifters by Spotify employees Friday after the podcasting network canned their $20 million deal. Bill Simmons, the sportscaster, who is also head of Spotify's international sports content, said on his own podcast, "The effing grifters. That's the podcast we should have launched with them." Wow. His attack deepened the couple's crisis as sources said they were lazy compared to the Obamas, who also had a Spotify contract. The collapse of the deal piles financial pressure on the Sussexes as the exorbitant bills for their Montecito, California lifestyle mount. Now, this is the thing. They expected that Obama money without putting in any of the Obama work because they have royal titles. And look, they got the deal in the first place because of their royal titles, not because they've proven to be talented in anything in particular. They're not producers. They're not content creators. They don't have a track record of producing any content. So we know that they got the deal because of their royal status. And that's why Meghan wanted to run for the hills. She wanted to take the titles and run. Because royalty is kind of revered in Hollywood. But only when you're actually a working royal, not using your royal title to now get ahead in Hollywood, rather than using your talent, rather than using, you know, your work. letting it speak for itself. And I'm not saying Hollywood is the most wholesome place, but, people generally tend to be talented before they get their shot. They have to work on their, on their skills, on their craft before they get their big break. But Meghan and Harry thought they would just waltz in and be given all these deals, which to a degree they were. But you don't just get the deal and don't have to do anything. You have to prove yourself. And a lot of these, deals, there's a contingency to them. You can't just expect you're going to get the money without doing the work. Absolutely ridiculous. So it goes on about, their house is $14.7 million. And I believe that's £16 million. And Harry admitted on Oprah that he used his mother's money, the money that she left to him. That's what he used, to buy the house. So he didn't really have endless supply of funds. He was heavily reliant on this Spotify money, on this Netflix money, on the money from Spare. That's what he was heavily reliant on, especially with the spending that his wife does. And they're saying that the security is believed to be about $2 million a year. There are legal fees from Harry's unending battles with the British press, and they have to keep their Archewell company afloat without Spotify's cash. And, we've seen from the French documentary, they went to the Archewell premises and there was no one there. The Sussex's Spotify deal was signed in 2020, but delivered just 13 hours of programming in 2.5 years. So I was actually being kind by saying it was in 2 years, but it was 2.5 years, 12 episodes of Markle's Archetypes podcast and a one-off holiday special. They will not be paid anything close to the full amount they could have earned under the deal. Sources pointedly contrasted the Sussex's failed deal with the Obamas' similar deal, which ended last year. Although Archetypes did well and got a couple of awards, when you go into a deal like this, to have just one series over that course of time is just not great, a source close to the Sussex's deal said. To put that into context, the Obamas, for their production company, Higher Ground, delivered multiple new series. Simmons told how he had been called to help Harry unsuccessfully, saying, "I gotta get drunk one night and tell the story of this Zoom I had with Harry to try to help him with a podcast idea. It's one of my best stories. Please, please tell that story. We want to hear. I'm gonna start listening to his podcast." He added, "I wish I had been involved in the Meghan and Harry leave Spotify negotiation. That's a podcast we should have launched with them." Another industry insider added, Spotify wants to focus on people who drive strong audiences like Alex Cooper, Dax Shepard, Emma Chamberlain. There are a lot of great creators who are very eager. Meghan and Harry are the outlier on all of this. I think they have come off as being lazy and difficult. In a statement, both Spotify and Archewell said they mutually agreed to part ways and are proud of the series they made together. Losing Spotify is a dramatic change in fortunes for the pair, since they quit being full-time royals, pleaded for privacy and launched their new American lives with an explosive Oprah Winfrey interview trashing Harry's family in 2021. But since signing deals with Netflix and Spotify, the couple's popularity appears to have plunged, as they have been plagued by staff turnover. Interesting, even in Montecito, the turnover continues, but we're supposed to believe there's no truth to the whole bullying allegations. So, yep, they're a laughing stock, as we saw, what happened last month in New York. And not only were they lazy, they sounded entitled. They sounded difficult to work with. Imagine not having any content, but being arrogant with the zero content you've produced. You would think that would humble them and they would ask for help to get some content out. But in the end, Spotify, it sounds like, had to do all the work. And yeah, I'm glad to hear that they're not getting that 20 million because they don't deserve it. And it shouldn't be treated any differently from anybody else. That was a big deal that they received and they blew it. Just like they blew being working royals. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves and God willing, I will see you in the next video.